mean, you gotta have some place to live. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I want to take an initial stab at integrating house hunting into your military retirement or even just your military transition. See, the military gives you time to do house hunting during your transition. But the complication is that your military transition is really a collection of different time-phased actions. And simultaneously, house hunting is its own collection of time-phased events with its own milestones and deadlines. I argue that when you attempt to overlay house hunting with the military retirement process, you run into a number of significant friction points. In fact, before we get too deep into the weeds, let me say this. Veteran homelessness is a serious problem, and yet the Transition Assistance Program focuses primarily on employment and benefits. It's weird because everybody needs a place to live, and yet when you get to your final out, there is nobody who's going to ask, "Do you have a place to stay?" As far as I can tell, the assumption is that as long as you have employment, then everything else is just going to work out. But if you are couch surfing, that's not a good start. Okay, to get started, I'm going to break house hunting down into three broad categories: couch surfing, renting, and buying. There are pros and cons to each of these options, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but for now, it's important to recognize that house hunting covers a really wide range of housing solutions. And I get the sense that the Department of Defense is really thinking about renting when they say house hunting. The other assumption that I'm making about house hunting is that you are moving to a location that is different than the one where you ended your service. While a lot of the factors that I'm going to discuss are relevant if you're staying local, maybe you're just moving off post, they have much more dramatic implications if you're moving cross-country or if you're moving back to the U.S. from an OCONUS assignment. That said, there are basically three steps in the house hunting process. Pick a geographical area, select a property, and then contract for that property. This first step, determining where you are going to live after you leave the military, is one of the earliest considerations that you should start working on. In fact, you should probably be thinking about this one long before you actually see retirement on the horizon, because you might get surprised by how quickly you have to get out. Where you live is largely tied up with what you want to do once you're out of the military. If you plan to work, are there places that offer better opportunities? Are you going to school, and is that going to determine where you're going to live? And how you intend to solve the housing problem also has an impact on where you end up. If you're couch surfing, you got to go where the people who are willing to take you in live. I mean, are you going to move back home with your folks? You do that, you might just be headed back to the exact same place that you joined the military to get away from. You can basically rent a place anywhere, so that provides a degree of flexibility. But if you're looking to buy a house, you have to be a heck of a lot more confident about where you are going to move to. The next step is you have to find a place, a property, and this is where things start to get tricky. You got to tour apartments and houses. You got to hone in on the neighborhoods that you're interested in, the schools and communities. You can do some of this online, but certainly not all. And while house hunting seems to be the primary reason that the Department of Defense gives you non-chargeable leave, you can run into a timing problem here. If you're looking to rent, you can probably get this done in the 90 days right before you separate. But if you're looking to buy, you may have to start this process much, much sooner. And your command may not be entirely supportive of that. I mean, you may have to use chargeable leave to get it done. And the whole reason for this is because of the amount of time it takes to contract for that property. Rental agreements might be pretty quick, but a sales contract, well, it can take weeks of going back and forth. Offer, counteroffer. And then the whole closing process with inspections and mortgages and title companies. That can tack on 2 additional months to your timeline. Never mind if you're trying to get a VA home loan, that adds its own time. The point being that if you are planning to buy, you gotta start early. Oh, and consider this. If you are going to get a mortgage for a home, you're going to have to prove that you have income. That may be really complicated if you wait until just after you're retired to apply for that mortgage. You don't have your military pay anymore, let alone your basic allowance for housing, and DFAS may not have completed the process to set up your retired account. So if your plan is to buy a post-retirement house, you're much better off if you can get the purchase complete before you actually retire. Oh, and here is one more reason for that. While you are on active duty, you can borrow against your TSP account specifically to provide a down payment to purchase a home. But once you are retired, you can't. So if you're planning to buy, it seems you want to get this done long before you get into the TAP process and the final 180 days of your military career. But like I said, that requires a high degree of confidence about where you're trying to go. I think this is one of the reasons that DoD lines things up as if they assume that transitioning soldiers are going to rent. Now look, I am absolutely certain that I have glossed over important points here. In fact, I personally avoided making a move at my transition just because of all this complexity. So if you guys have insights, I would love to hear them. And in the meantime, watch this video to get an overview of how leave planning works and how you can make the most out of your entitlements. Or you can watch this video to see whether or not it's a good idea to sell your leave.